Pick one. The Sabres or the Rangers? What has you more intrigued?
Really? Sabres.
I love chaos.
Okay. So is this... So I genuinely...
what's happening in New York is just like not chaotic. It's just totally normal where you fire everybody.
That's nuts.
What? So I am genuinely confused by the Eichel situation. It sounded like he wanted a second opinion, and then last show we weren't sure if he got it, but it sounds like he got it. But the Sabres don't want him to get the surgery, but he really wants the surgery. What are the ins and outs of him, being able to make decisions about his own body, and where is he getting traded? Because he's very extraordinarily getting traded.
The only reason this is confusing is because everyone can't say everything out loud, like connected to the situation. But like, it's actually pretty simple. The Sabres doctors don't believe he needs a surgery, wanted to see him go through this 12-week period that ends May 30th and see where he's at then, because they think the surgery has some risks. I think every surgery has some risks, but the particular type of neck procedure he's looking at has never been done by an NHL player. And so, if you're the Sabres on this, obviously everyone wants Jack Eichel to be healthy. Like that is definitely 100% fundamentally true. But the Sabres have a lot of money tied up in him, and obviously they want to make sure that he doesn't become damaged even worse in the course of the surgery. Jack Eichel, through whatever medical advice he's gotten independently, wants to have that surgery, believes it is the best way for him to get back the soonest and to play at his best. And, at this point, the Sabres haven't allowed that to happen. There's language in the CBA, essentially. There's a whole huge section about how you can get second opinions and the way it all works. But ultimately, what it boils down to is the team has to sign off on what happens. A player can't just say, F you, I'm getting this surgery, it's my body. That's part of signing a contract in the NHL. I know it's almost hard to wrap your mind around, but remember the Sabres gave him an $80 million contract. And so they get a say in these matters because it pertains to his ability to do his job. And so I think that's really where they're at. May 30th, as I mentioned, is when this rest period ends. So, as that gets closer, I'm sure they'll revisit this in one way, shape, or form. I think it's actually probably an understated part of the trade discussion is how do you trade him when his health is a bit of an open question mark. And I don't want to make any light of that. He was bad enough. He missed most of the season. A neck injury is nothing to trifle with at any age. So, let's hope he can get back to being there. And where he gets traded, open question. Like, the Rangers in LA are obvious. They've been there. They've had those discussions in the past. I think they have the kind of pieces, prospects, and motivation to make a big trade. I think teams like Calgary, Montreal, Columbus, there are some teams out there that have obvious needs, I think, for an impact number one center that, and will recognize that you can't get that guy very often unless you draft him, but this is the one chance you might have to make a big trade to do it. So I could see them being sort of low key in there. Minnesota is all of a sudden maybe an interesting option because the Wild have become fun at some point, magically in a pandemic.
Yep.
And I mean, really fun. I'm actually not being sarcastic. Like, I love
they're awesome.
Wild play.
Totally.
They're
awesome.
fast and fun, and Kirill Kaprizov is just dynamic. I mean, it's great. But then there's probably some mystery team. Like, I'm not starting. Please don't tag this, but even if you're like a team like the Leafs or the Oilers and you're good at center, aren't you at least exploring to see if you could get even better somehow? Like, if there's a trade that might make sense, so
it'd be great.
Well, look at here's a thing that's going to happen at some point, and I don't have the date, but at some point I think it's reasonable to expect that John Tavares has moved to the wing. And that happens to all kinds of players as they age, and they can still be super productive. Like Steven Stamkos has played a lot of the wing the last few years. And if you look at his points per game, he's still giving value, but it's probably easier to shift someone like that to the wing at some point. So if you're going to use that as your premise, the Leafs will probably need a number two center. I'm not saying it's next season, but they know that's coming somewhere down the line. And so maybe there's an incentive to go and get someone like Eichel. Now, I would say if we had to rank teams most likely to trade for him, Toronto's in the 20s. So I'm not saying this is likely to happen, but what I do believe is that teams that aren't even obvious fits are going to explore the possibility just to see
how do you
if it
pull
could
them in.
Work.
Well,
it could work.
And the trade Nylander crowd is going to just love hearing this because that's got to be the obvious guy to go the other way if that were to happen.
I hate that crowd.
I know. Me too. I want to see Tavares, Eichel, Nylander. That's what I'd like to see.
So you're telling me there's a chance.
But I will say this, that I think this is a big playoffs. I mean, it's a big playoffs for the whole team, but if they have to address the core after this playoffs, Nylander's probably the most tradable asset, frankly, that they would consider trading. So the trade Nylander crowd won't be totally silenced. And I think it's look at Willie's had his second straight really strong regular season, especially the second half of this one, but he hasn't really shown it in the playoffs in the prior years. And so, there's something for him to prove there. He doesn't have to carry the team, but I think you got to see a level of consistent competitive instincts, fire, whatever you want to call it, and a bit of production, or else, at some point something's going to change. And
a team like Buffalo wouldn't care about his playoff performance because they're not going anyway for a while. So it's probably going to be like, I also think people are like, well, how could they fit the salary? I'm going through my head now, Chris, because I'm a Leaf fan. I know you got to go. Morgan Riley's salary coming off the books, Freddie Anderson's salary coming off the books. Morgan will be another year, but there's a tradable asset. You could make that happen. And
look, these guys are gurus. They can make anything happen. Like what they've just done. So the roster that I think they're going to ice for the first game of the playoffs, just the players in the lineup and not the ones scratched, are going to be $86 million in an $81.5 million cap world. So,
they can make it happen.
Cheating.
It's not, the Lightning did the same thing, right? They're all of a sudden adding a $9.5 million player in Kucherov on game one of the playoffs. And that's to an existing roster that was, at the cap. So these are the rules of engagement if you're trying to win in the NHL. And the reason I would say it's not cheating is look at all the picks they had to give up for salary retention on Nash and on Foligno. Like that's how they made it happen. In part, they also made it happen by convincing Joe Thornton to take a league minimum deal, by retaining Jason Spezza at $700,000. Like they've been value shoppers, but they've built a pretty damn good team in a cap environment with a lot of money tied up in their top offensive players.
Chris Johnston, Sportsnet. Thank you so much. Follow him at Reporter Chris on Twitter. We love having you on. Excited for the playoffs. We know we probably won't see it till afterwards. So have a good time. And when
am I being kicked off the pod?
No,
you're not busy. Bringing me back in
CJ. If you join us mid playoffs, I promise to actually be there for the start of the show.
well, I'll make this promise here. If the Leafs win their first playoff round since 2004, I think you got to have me on to break it down, to look ahead, to talk about history, because I'm one of the few old enough to remember 2004 without needing an encyclopedia, young Adam.
I can remember that.
And I think it'd be pretty cool just to see what happens in the city if that happens. And if they lose, you're probably going to want me back because I tend to set fire to all my relationships after the day that they clean out their locker. So
right.